So, Jamie, what's on your mind?
I've been thinking a lot about what's the right age for a president. And this is in light of the bigger conversation globally about gerontocracy. So gerontocracy, if you're not aware, is a term that is used to describe a government or leadership by the elderly. So one of the big places where it's being discussed is in the US. Because in the US right now, you've got Joe Biden, who's turning 82.
Yeah.
You've got Donald Trump as well, who's further along in his years as well. He's an elderly gentleman. And people are saying, this is not really what we want. We don't want this government by these old men. We want new options. But then when you bring it back into the African context as well, we're dealing with similar numbers, right? President Cyril Ramaphosa is 71. If you look at the Minister of Education, Angie Musheka, she's 66. If you look at the Minister of Health, Dr. Pala, he's, 66?
Yeah.
So
Angie's 68.
66. Yeah. So that's all over the retirement age. The retirement age can be 60 or 65, but we have basically a government by retirees or people who should be in retirement age. And in America, one of the biggest things that is now holding Joe Biden back is that people are concerned about his age. They're concerned about, can he finish his term of office? Because they're beginning to see little things that concern them. For instance, he's no longer going down the steps of the Air Force One.
Okay.
He now uses a different entrance because they're worried that the steps will be too much for him. Do you understand? So that's an example of your team working around your limitations. But to people looking at that, it can lead to concerns, not about necessarily now, the year 2024, but you still have to run an administration for 4 more years.
That's true.
And he'll be 86 at the end of his term. So people are wondering, is that too old? Look at Africa, you've got Mnangagwa, he's 81.
Yeah. You've got Museveni, who is 79. Yeah.
The late president of Namibia, Hage Geingob, he was 82, I think, when he passed on, and he died in the presidency. So this conversation about gerontocracy is one that speaks to understanding of the different generational needs, understanding of the moment. It speaks about capacity and energy. And it also speaks, I think, to also a symbolism that people are concerned about. So if we break this down in layers, looking at the first thing, in Africa, the median age is 19. That's the median age.
Right.
So you've got a very young population being led by a group of wealthy elites. Because by the time these people enter these presidential positions, they are billionaires, they're multimillionaires, or they've been operating in corrupt leadership structures for so long that they've amassed a lot of wealth, a lot of patronage. So now the concerns of a 19-year-old, right, looking into the future of Africa are totally different to the concerns of somebody who is now 81, 72, etc. So this difference means that the prioritization may be very different. What is prioritized by someone who's 71 is not necessarily going to be prioritized by someone who's 19, and may not be in the interests of the person who is 19. Do you understand?
Yeah.
And even if you look at the Agenda 2063, when the African Union came up with its great plan to solve Africa's problems, they said, we'll be done by 2063. Imagine saying that to a 20-year-old, a 19-year-old, to say, we'll fix your concerns, but by 2063, check in with us. First and foremost, you guys will not be alive in 2063. You'll all be gone.
So we can't even hold you accountable.
Who's going to be held to account for this? But also, while America and China and Taiwan are developing artificial intelligence, people are developing robots. We've seen so many robotics companies right now emerging in a variety of places. Can you really say to the African, wait for water, wait for electricity, wait for a road, wait for a working university close to you? 2063, you'll get your stuff. So that shows a lack of urgency.
That's true.
Which comes from the fact that those people don't actually get affected by the experiences that are concerning and affecting a 19-year-old.
Yeah.
Right? So that's just number one. Can you be an accurate representative of a person who is 2 generations away from you?
So it's not petty or entitled of young people to say we want representation and true representation. We want leaders that look sound and possibly even are in our age group.
Yeah, look, there's a caveat to that, right?
Okay.
So I think I always understand why young people say what they say.
Mm-hmm.
But the other concern I have is that I don't think that a 22-year-old necessarily can run a ministry or run a country or anything like that, because it takes time to get a certain body of experience,
Okay.
to get a certain body of knowledge. For example, it takes time to become a partner in a law firm. You understand? After you finish law school, you have to do your articles for 2 years, and then you become an associate, then you become a senior associate, then you become a salaried partner, then maybe you become a partner if you're still within the legal fraternity. So if you come into the legal community at 22, it may take you till 32 to become a partner. By that time, you have gone through the various ranks of a law firm and have proved yourself to be capable and worthy of occupying that particular status. Same applies to engineering. You get the engineering degree, but that is really the beginning of your certification and accreditation as an engineer, because you still have to do a lot within the engineering fraternity and community before you get your credentials as a full engineer. Even though you loosely may call yourself an engineer, but it takes a while before you have the responsibilities of large projects under your own name.
Okay.
Do you understand what I'm trying to put across?
So it's not completely ruled out, but you just have to put in more work.
Yes. So I think we do need young people, but we do need to make sure that we get the right young people, right? And I do actually think that there's a sweet spot. I think that between the ages of 30 and 45, that's when we really see high impact leadership.
Okay.
And I've got some case studies for you. So Steve Jobs, when he returned to Apple after Apple was collapsing in the 90s, he returned to Apple in 1997 and he was 42.
Okay.
And he had now gained a lot of experience from his previous years, because when he left Apple, he was a chaotic young visionary, but he was not capable to lead. So Steve Jobs at 25 would have ruined Apple.
Okay.
Which is why they had to get rid of him, right? But Steve Jobs at 42 saved Apple. Do you understand? And that's a 17-year gap between the two Steve Jobs, because one was chaotic and the other was not only visionary but capable of managing and leading his team, right? So the first Steve Jobs was able to get them to the IPO, $1 billion. Everyone is wealthy, but he could not run that kind of operation.
He couldn't maintain that.
Exactly. So Steve Jobs at 42 shows what is capable at that age. Then you look at Thomas Sankara, he was one of the most impactful, hardworking, diligent presidents in the history of Africa. He comes in early, unfortunately gets assassinated at 37 by basically, disloyal agents of the West. But he was 37 at the time that he passed away.
And when he came into presidency?
When did he come in? It was about 33 when he came in. So he had about 4 years. So if you think about that, Sankara also shows us that there is this sweet spot, of youthful leadership, so to speak. And I think it's between 30 and 45 where I think you really, if there's a lot of work that needs to be done. If you think about Elon Musk, the first Tesla was launched at 37. Now, Elon had already had lots of commercial success, but his first companies were chaotic. There were a lot of fights. People were unhappy with him, especially in the late 90s. He was making money, but he really came into his leadership swing around about the time of the launch of that first Tesla in 2008. That's when you start getting into peak Elon. So I think you look at that trajectory. It's a man who's able to sleep at the factory. He's a man who's able to push and pull and manage multiple enterprises, Tesla, SpaceX, and he's able to direct his energies in a useful and constructive way. He was 37 in 2008, right? You look at Paul Kagame when he became president of Rwanda, because he started off as vice president, became president when he was 42. And I think a lot of people are happy with the quality of services in Rwanda, even though there are some question marks around whether or not it's a democracy.
Of course.
But if you look at those examples, there's a pattern that you can begin to extract and extrapolate, that the right age mix for dealing with difficult challenges and dealing with difficult leadership situations is between that 30 to 45, maybe even 30 to 50, right? There are some outliers, the founder, the guy who actually made McDonald's the big brand that it is it Ray Kroc? He got into McDonald's later in his life. First, he was in another business that was servicing McDonald's, and then he realized the potential, and he was like, you know what, these brothers are playing. Let me take over this thing and make it pop.
Sure.
But in the main, I think that you can conclude that there's a pattern that you can spot about when do you get prime management, prime leadership. And in fact, even in South Africa, a lot of the guys who were heroes in the early 90s and 2000s came into leadership in their late 30s, early 40s.
Right.
But now they are holding on to those leadership positions.
And there's no capacity anymore.
Look, there's I think there may be mental capacity, but there may not be physical capacity.
Right.
Energy, stamina. Also now, there's no legacy to defend and live through.
Sure.
Because one of the things that happens when you are approaching your later years is that you don't have to prove anything anymore. You feel like you've arrived. But when you're younger, you want to have a legacy, and you're going to live long enough for you to be held accountable for your legacy. So you want to be great. You want to be one of the great ones. You want to use your position of leadership to provide impact. Because if you get presidency at 35, by 50, you will still be alive, and people will be able to hold you to account, and you won't be able to walk away necessarily into the twilight of years. But if you're like 75, 85, you don't care. You don't care. And this is where I think the challenge lies. It's one that there's a representation issue in terms of, can you really prioritize and recognize my needs as someone who's living 2 generations away from you? But also there's this issue of, are these people best placed to deal with the challenges of the administration when they enter? Because leadership, whenever you enter into leadership, there are challenges in that situation.
Always.
There are massive problems, and those problems are looking at you to solve, to fix.
So does this mean age is not just a number?
I don't think it's just a number. And I think we're seeing that. Whether we like it or not, there comes a time when you are no longer going to be at the peak of your capabilities and abilities.
True.
And there comes a time when you don't have the stamina to be able to see through every leadership challenge and to be able to execute on your vision the same way that you could in your younger days. Now, because we're dealing with management, with leadership and stuff like this, it's not like being a soccer player. You can definitely do it for much longer. But I think that 65 should really be a time where you should transition to an advisory capacity. You can still help and do a lot at an advisory capacity. But the last point I wanted to make is that I think we're seeing greed from a lot of these older leaders, who some of them felt like they waited on the sidelines, they didn't get an opportunity. So now, even though they know that they shouldn't be in these positions because they're not the best place to deal with the challenges of the moment, they still want to leave.
Yeah.
If you look at all of these African presidents, some of them, it does come across like you're greedy. You don't have to be running for a second term.
No.
You did it. We saw what you can do. Pass the buck. Let's try to fix the issues. And we're not seeing that. So I actually think that gerontocracy is a problem. And I think that we need to request and make more urgent requests for seeing more capable, qualified, accredited young people in more spaces. And if we don't make that call, a clarion call of our generation, we will continue to be led by old men and women, many of whom in the African context are involved in the stealing, the looting, the pillaging of Africa for the benefit of their own families and not for the benefit of the people. They have no urgency, they have no connection to the ground, and as such they don't feel an obligation to us, and many of them are selling out this continent for cents on the dollar. And I think that we should be concerned about that, because we have to live in the future that they are creating, while their children will be able to live overseas and be able to escape the consequences of the dirty dishes their parents and grandparents left behind.
One of the ways that we can make that clarion call is by keeping the conversation going. So let us know what your thoughts are in the comment section. Tweet, share. We'd love to hear from you.